Welcome to a journey of patriotism and civic engagement with this Patriot's Perspective, where we navigate history, civics, and the American spirit.
Welcome back, Patriots! Tonight we're doing another episode of Idaho Rewind, where we say the quiet stuff out loud, and this episode is titled, Just Pick Any Old Rock, It Will Be Fine. The issue that we're broaching tonight is a national one, but to give it the right depth and continuity to our theme, I'm going to use Idaho as the history as to why this is occurring. I don't spend much time giving a rat about what is trending on YouTube or TikTok because, frankly, the latter is a cesspool of stupid, and YouTube doesn't care what interests you, just what it can get you to blindly click on in your customized feed. Like when I spend the majority of my time watching science and mechanical video content, do they show me dashcam footage compilations, random reactions to people reacting randomly, liberals crapping themselves over Tucker Carlson going to Russia, and big-breasted women chopping firewood? You can't stop it. It just keeps pouring on, all the while not showing me new videos from those channels I've subscribed to. Stupid. One thing I'm starting to see a ton of is tiny home, off-grid living, boondocking, and overlanding content. Not just a little, but lots of it. I have to admit, I have been sucked into that vortex from time to time, and though some of them are really interesting, many of them are just plain sad. When you start to dig into the content and the stories behind some of the creators, you find that many of them chose this life, while others are actually kind of forced into it. Coming completely from the book of me, I see this all as a bunch of rebranded horse pucky. We used to call the guy that came by to get your trash every week the garbage man. There were a few women in the mix, and some folks, not the garbage women of course, started talking about how sexist it was that we called them garbage men, and the trend to call them all something stupid like refuse disposal technicians, which is fun because picking up a can and emptying it in a bin on the truck has zero technicality to it. But I digress. Then the trucks became more high-tech and have lifts, so it doesn't take brute force to pick up the trash. Sorry, refuse. And there are a lot more women working for waste management companies, and good for them. The pay is usually pretty good. But what we have here in the topic of this podcast is a rebranding of homelessness. In case you've been living under a rock, with internet I guess, the terms are different but same. Boondocking is taking your vehicle of choice, oftentimes it's a motorhome or a truck and camper or trailer, and going out into an undeveloped area and camping. The desert Southwest is a popular locale for this kind of existence, and it is a fully disconnected life where you take with you all that you need to comfortably survive and you live nomadically on the move. Or not. Overlanding is taking your vehicle of choice, generally a smaller kind of rig like a Chevy Suburban, Toyota Land Cruiser, truck with a camper or the like, and in many cases, but not all, going out into undeveloped areas and camping. Starting to see the similarities here? Let's add in these van life folks. This is pretty much the same thing as overlanding, except they tend to stay more suburban than out in Sticksville and are generally in camper vans or SUVs. And they find parking lots, truck stops, and campgrounds to hang their beach towel. This category also usually includes the schoolie folks, those that take old school buses and convert them into RVs, as well as the random stealth vehicle, like converted box trucks or out-of-service U-Hauls, and other odd and sundry not the usual camping or RV types of vehicles. Categorically, boondockers generally have rigs large enough to have their own showers on board or use outdoor shower setups. Overlanders quite often are camped in areas that they can shower with a portable shower kit, or they have onboard water heating and may be able to use bath and shower facilities in parks or campgrounds. Van lifers, on the other hand, are usually using outdoor shower kits or have paid for 24-hour gym memberships so that they can sneak in and grab a workout and use the facilities because their rigs don't have that capability. Technology-wise, boondockers have gained the ability to use Elon Musk's Starlink network to get internet out in the middle of nowhere, and cellular coverage is sometimes available. Overlanders seem to be using the same options for their connection to the interweirds as well. Van lifers are a bit different, because they don't tend to spend all their time out of cell range, or even out of the cities for that matter. They don't spend the money on extra gear, but just use their cell phones and conserve data usage by going to places like Starbucks to do computer work and upload video content to their channels on free Wi-Fi. Van lifers can also be seen sitting in laundromats because they don't usually have the option of hanging laundry out on a line. 10 to 15 years ago, when all of this was starting to come to popularity, these content creators were working to glorify this kind of lifestyle. It was a free kind of existence. You could move about however you wanted to. You didn't have to pay for rent or property taxes. You were beholden to nobody, and there was lots of places you could go and experience with very little imperial entrapments. They spent little time talking about the cost of maintenance on their vehicles, the cost of places to stay if you didn't choose a sand-covered parking area in the middle of the desert, and what happens when you break down in your house 50 miles from nowhere, as well as the people coming and banging on your window at 3 a.m. to see if you're in there or not, so they knew if they could break in and rob you of your stuff. That kind of life came with its own pitfalls and issues that doesn't garner views or donations through Patreon, so they left it out of the mix. The trend to take on that lifestyle started to grow because so many wanted truly independent living. That is, so it appeared anyway. If you watch enough of this content over time, you will see a new emerging theme coming about. Necessity is really a mother. Guess what? Now there were additional content types coming out about stealth living in storage units. Why on earth would you work that hard to not be noticed while living in a box with no facilities? It's cheap, that's why. And besides that, some of the newer and quite large facilities had climate-controlled storage buildings with restrooms in them for their customers. Bonus! This was no longer just because it was fun and independent living, but because it was better than the alternative of living on a sidewalk or under an overpass in a cardboard box. We have seen the homeless crisis explode all over the country, and I will spare you my vitriolic rant against those that are causing this to happen, but I'm sure you can imagine what I would be saying about it. It's not nice. These alternative and quite mobile lifestyles used to be a fringe thing, and people didn't spend much time paying attention to them because these people generally were good stewards of the area around them and acted as civil citizens do. They picked up their trash, they kept the places they were staying clean, and they were respectful to others while doing it. As the homelessness epidemic has thrived, though, and enlarged itself, the now common homeless person doesn't have those values since their own survival is far more important than civility. You can no longer go and stop for the night at a Walmart parking lot as you travel because the homeless have moved in and are trashing these places, and the number of options has been significantly reduced. Because of this, many of the van lifers are starting to expose the truths about how hostile people are to all of this, and many talk about having to sleep during the day or in short bursts throughout the day because at night they will get the knock. That hostile neighbor, the homeless person in the Walmart parking lot looking for money, drugs, or sex, or even the police telling you to move on. People are looking out for someone to threaten and abuse for living in a vehicle now, and it has gone as far as directed violence. So if this type of living is getting hard to deal with, why are more and more people choosing it? Well, they don't really have a choice. There are tons of channels with comments saying that they've been forced at one point to live in their cars or that they were setting up a vehicle to move into just because it had become all they could afford. Nomadic living has become a norm for many because they have just enough wherewithal to cover some limited expenses, but not enough money or interest to live in a rental with 8 other strangers. It is one step up above homelessness and 10 steps below the life that used to be considered the American dream. And to add insult to injury, when COVID hit, many jobs that were done in an office were now done in people's personal spaces. You didn't have to come into the office, so your office could literally be sitting in a park in New Mexico under a picnic cover as long as you could get internet access. Due to the fact that you can get some monetization from creating content as well, as long as you don't suck at it, you could do so simply as part of your existence. Just film every tiny piece of your life and put it up on the interwebs for others to judge and pity. You now have multiple streams of income and the freedom to roam. Cue the next round of explosive growth in this type of content and the number of custom-branded homeless people. But about a year ago, these companies wanted their employees to come back to the office so that they could collaborate better or keep track of them better, or stop them from living like homeless hermits with YouTube channels that wasted their productive time on things not company related. You do the math here. Lots of these folks lost their jobs because they had cast off their chains, pulled up their roots, and went off script, and couldn't go back to what they might have had for the old lifestyle. Many just chose not to go back. There are a bunch of new companies that offer gig work for remote computing and have captured a number of these people. But many are now just simply homeless. So how do I wrap this all up in a quinoa and rice flour flatbread with just a hint of sriracha and wasabi to make it an Idaho Rewind topic? Well, that's the easy part. The national issue that has really been fueling this is the cost of living, or more specifically, the oppressive level of taxation. In my research, I found a document provided by the tax folks at idaho.gov that breaks down the tax situation in Idaho going as far back as 1863, which was 27 years before Idaho even became a state. I want to cover some of the highlights as to how I and all other Idaho citizens are being taxed. This is actually a topic that could cover 10 podcasts, but I won't ruin your day for months to come over this silly little nuisance that we have all come to tolerate and expect. Did I mention that giving away approximately 50% of your income was a silly little nuisance? Shame on me. What was I thinking? The sarcasm is strong with this one. Was that Yoda or Grover? I don't know. Let's get into this document, understanding, of course, that unless you're watching along on the Idaho Rewind YouTube channel that is linked in the comments below, you can't see what I'm talking about. So I will do my best to explain what is being shown. Class, open your books to page 1. The land area that we now know as Idaho started out as territorial lands and was for the most part of Oregon up until 1863, when it became officially the Idaho Territory. Up until this point, it appears that the only thing taxed was land, taxed at 0.25%, and a poll tax of all adult males at 50 cents a year. Poll tax used to be collected as a right to vote, whether you did or not, but was actually a mechanism used to disenfranchise non-white folks from voting. But that disenfranchisement is a whole nother podcast. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that. So here we can see that from 1863 to 1890, there was a pretty expansive list of taxes collected, such as poll taxes, which were imposed on each adult male inhabitant, with half of the revenue going to the territory and half to the counties. License taxes for Mongolians or Chinamen. That's right, you had to have a license to be Chinese. Also for professionals, including physicians, surgeons, dentists, attorneys, or local officials, and for the operation of pool tables. I am so humming songs from the Music Man in my head right now. As well as bowling alleys, theaters, exhibitions, insurance companies, pawnbrokers, intelligence offices, brokerage houses, banks, vendors, or dealers in wines or spirits, and receipt taxes on proceeds from mines, toll roads, bridges, ferries, or the like. Now, I had to look up what in the heck an intelligence office was, because I had never heard of that term before. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary was the only place I found that had a clue, and it appears that it is an agency where servants could be hired. So, domestic labor. Or what sounds like day labor or like an employment agency. Or the much older version of the Home Depot parking lot in blue cities. During this point in history, the word property did not mean just land. It also meant that all you owned. In this reference here, there's an exemption for mechanics tools over $50. In that day, $50 was a lot of money, but this shows that you could be taxed for items that you use in your business just because they had value, which of course you might have to sell just to pay the taxes. In 1893, that value went up to $200. They must have had a bunch of angry mechanics rallying about being taxed out of business. 1896 saw a repeal on receipt taxes on toll roads, bridges, and ferries. That was good, I guess. 1897 also saw a repeal on the license tax on theaters. Wonder if that made the popcorn cheaper. Oh, look here. 1903, they repealed the license tax on bankers. That had to have made them pretty happy. But 1911 was when things started to get a little repressive. One thing I haven't highlighted here yet, because that is what I'm doing on screen. Highlighting. Ba-dum-bump. Anywho, is that the state's budgets of revenue from property taxes was a relatively low number. In 1896, it was $231,000. 1897, it was $253,000. 1903, it was $275,000. 1905, it was $350,000. But only 2 years later in 1907, it jumped to $500,000. 2 years after that, it jumped another 20% to $600,000. Let's move forward 2 more years, and it took a giant leap for another 50% increase of $300,000 to a grand total of $900,000. It's pretty clear that the Idaho government was bloating like a scared pufferfish at this point, because they raised their budget by just shy of $750,000 in a piddly 8 years. By 1919, only 6 years later, it had doubled to $2 million, where it mostly stayed until this document stops listing it in 1963. 1911 is the same year that they added taxes for land improvements and set the exemption at $200 improvement value. If you were building a structure that had a value less than $200, you were good. More than that, pay up, buddy! To put even more salt in the wounds, starting in 1911, there would be a 3% gross receipt tax on all businesses. This was not the actual sales tax that we pay now, but a tax that the business owner was responsible for paying simply because they made revenue. You can bet your sweet bippy that this tax was immediately passed on to the consumer by raising prices, since many businesses did not have that much of an operating margin to begin with. In 1912, to be able to grab a little more cash from you, they separated the assessment of the land from its improvements, and each part was taxed at a different rate, presumably raising the taxation percentage of the improvements to a higher rate, making you pay more on them. 1912 was also the year that they set a uniform tax rate on your land based at 40% of the full sales value. I haven't been able to find the exact property tax rate, as each county is different and every year it fluctuates, though it never goes down and stays down. For argument's sake, you can figure it was around 2 to 5%. In 1913, they got super greedy though, and they raised the uniform tax rate from 40% of the value of your property to 100%. That had to be a bitter pill for many. 2 to 5% of 40% of your total property value is a whole lot less than based on the 100%. They also started taxing mobile homes, which at that point were just trailers originally designed for camping. Empty shells with no plumbing and sparse furniture. They didn't become a mainstream staple of society until the 1920s, but because people were buying or creating their own to avoid improvement taxes and living in them on their property, Idaho started taxing them. 1923 brought us the gas tax, or a tax on automotive fuel. Aircraft were exempted, however, but that wouldn't be for long. Then 1931 was when they enacted a kilowatt tax for all power generated within the state. Again, a tax levied against the company, but passed on to the consumer, because no taxes stay within the business's walls. This was also the time when they enacted a personal income tax at the state level, so you got to now pay taxes on the money you earned before you got to spend it, then use that money to pay the rest of the taxes that you already owned. Lovely. By this point in history, the addition of taxes slowed considerably, or at least as was obvious. New things did crop up, like automotive registrations and a license or registration fee on mobile homes, in addition to the taxes that were already paid. Tax rates crept up on all fronts, and in 1965, the state tried to pull a fast one by lowering the tax assessment value from 40% of the total to 20% of the total on personal property, and left the commercial tax rate at 40%. The phone company got a little bit angry, and they sued the state and won. The Idaho Constitution said that all entities were to be taxed evenly, and this was clearly not that. Tax rates were then based on 20% of full market value for all. Yay, equality! The whole property valuation thing has changed even since then, as like in 1978 there was a voter initiative that reduced the property taxes to a fixed 1% of the total value, known as a flat tax, and there's a lot of additional history on that which I won't get into here. So, basically, a manufacturer buys raw products to make their own products out of to sell to you, and they pay taxes on it in the form of mining taxes and import-export taxes as well. Then they make their product paying the employment taxes. They pay use tax on those products that sit unsold on their shelves as an inventory tax. Yes, that is a thing. Paying for something that you have made that you have not sold yet. Then hopefully they sell that product to you, where you use the money that you paid income taxes on to pay for sales tax. You get into your car that you paid sales tax on, as well as licensing and registration fees. Fuel taxes on the fuel to make it go, and insurance, which is also a tax because it's mandatory, and you take it home to where you paid property taxes. Or if you don't own, at least at the very least, you pay for taxes on your power, your water, your sewer, your phone service, your internet. Quite literally, every single thing you do or have has been taxed at least once, but multiple times more than likely, and according to a study that then Governor Cecil Ingram had commissioned in Idaho, you are losing approximately 50% of your total income to taxes at every level. You work to keep only half of what you make, with the included cost of living way outpacing your income because of inflation. The current generation doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell of ever having the enjoyment of the American dream. I hope I didn't bore you to death, as I know that taxes are in my top 10 things that make me want to poke my eyes out with a pickle fork. For many, we are in a dark financial time, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over it. The key now is to understand how they're spending your money and to figure out ways of keeping them from doing it. This isn't something that can be answered at this time, and we will be revisiting this topic again soon. But for now, always remember that knowledge is power, and you, as a citizen of this great republic, have the ability to create positive change. We are going to lead this fight. So until the next time, keep your head up, your faith focused, and know that you have the power to do great things. Here at ACSA, we will never accept any kind of sponsorship like many of the social media people are doing, because we don't want to have someone else controlling our dialogue and speech. We need your help to fund this machine so that we can keep pushing forward, fighting in the courts for accountability, and keeping you informed and educated as best we can. Please, if you have the funds to do so, head on over to www.acsaidaho.org/donations and donate to our organization. Help us to fight in an arena that you may not be able to.